This Torah class is brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.
Okay, welcome everyone. Parshas Chukas. Very interesting subject tonight. This is something I heard about many years ago, probably more than 10 years ago. And I actually thought about speaking about it Shavuos night in combination with Rabbi Yehuda Hachasid, but I didn't realize that Rabbi Yehuda Hachasid would have like 14 parts to it, so there was no time. But this week is a good opportunity to speak about this subject. 1976, before a lot of you were born, or at least some of you. And there's a rabbi in Zurich, in Switzerland. His name is Rabbi Daniel Levy, who passed away not long ago. In fact, I believe his son took over his post in Switzerland. And I remember when I was learning, when I was in Koilel, so I went to get Shimush from Rabbi Bluth, who's a Talmud of Moshe. And this Rabbi Levy's son, who took over for him, came in to get Shimush at the same time. Okay, be it as it may, this Rabbi Levy, he noticed that one of the people in the community got his hands on a new manuscript, the commentary of supposedly Rabbi Yehuda Hachasid on Chumash, which is something quite valuable because Rabbi Yehuda Hachasid was a Rishon. Rabbi Yehuda Hachasid was one of the Glatstein. He lived from 1150 to 1217. We spoke about him extensively Shavuos night in a series that we gave on Torah Anytime. And he's one of the greatest of the Glatstein. So you can imagine to find a new commentary on Chumash from one of the Glatstein, what an amazing discovery. The problem was this Rabbi Daniel Levy suspected something a little fishy with this commentary. There were certain comments made in this particular manuscript that did not sit well with him, and therefore he sent a letter to the Gadol Hadar of the time, and that is Rav Moshe Feinstein Zecher Tzaddik Livracha. So let me give you a little background about what tonight's Shiur is about. Tonight's Shiur is about, in life people say, well, there are a lot of Mahalchim. There are different opinions. So, I have my derech, he has his derech, and they're all right. They're all valid ways of coming close to God. La'asid lavai, there's like a circle, and everyone's on the perimeter of the circle, and everyone points to God in the middle, and therefore everyone is equal. And every derech in life is equal. They're all legitimate. There's some truth to that. But is it a circle, really? Or perhaps that's maybe when Mashiach comes. But nowadays, it's not necessarily a circle. Maybe it's a square. Maybe there are people who are closer to the truth than others. Meaning, maybe, yes, there are different drachim that are legitimate. Maybe some are more legitimate than others. You know what the famous book, all drachim are created equal, but some are more equal than others. So that's the question. In other words, in any issue in life, you'll always find both opinions. Like, if you ever want to be Mekel, there's always a lenient opinion. If you ever want to be Machmer, there's always a Machmer opinion. The real question in life is not, can I find somebody to rely on? The real question in life is, am I really doing the right thing? Or is there really a right thing? And what we're going to learn tonight is, there might be, which is a frightening thing. Meaning, it's not necessarily all good. It might be a healthy attitude when you look at other people to say, it's all good and everyone's doing the right thing. But in terms of one's own conscience, perhaps one should try to seek out what really is the right thing. And sometimes it's confusing because you could have great tzaddikim and great chachamim who they vary on both sides of the spectrum. Okay, so now that maybe I whet your appetite, let's get right into it. Rav Moshe hears about this document that was found, and Rav Moshe gives us the following introduction. And that is, the Gemara says in Sanhedrin, on Daf Tzadik Tesamud Beis, on the pasuk, Ki Dvar Hashem Baza, the word of God he disgraced. And the punishment of someone who disgraces the word of God is kares. Who is this pasuk referring to? Says the Gemara, Ha'omer ein Torah min hashamayim. Someone who says the Torah is not divinely given. Meaning, Moshe Rabbeinu chas v'shalom made it up. Not only that, let's say you say the whole Torah is min hashamayim, except, look, I love cheeseburgers. There's no way God doesn't want me to eat a cheeseburger. The pasuk lo'isavasha gadi b'chalev imay, Moshe Rabbeinu made up. The rest of it is legit. But Moshe Rabbeinu was the one who made up Loisavash Gadi B'Chalev Imay. Apikorsus. You're a Dvar Hashem Baza. Even, says the Gemara, Afilu Amar Kol HaTorah Kula Min Hashem Chutz Mi Pasuk Zeh Shalai Amar HaKadosh Baruch Hu Al Moshe Pi Atzmai Zehu Ki Dvar Hashem Baza. Even if, let's say, you say the whole Torah is from heaven except for one diktuk, or one kavachomer, or one gzeira shava, if you deny even a minutia of tradition, you're a koifer be'ikr. You're a koifer b'Torah, you're Apikorsus. In other words, what would the difference be between someone who says the whole Torah is made up, and someone who says the thousands of psukim are true except for one? What's the difference between them? None. There's no difference. There's no difference. One is not better than the other. They're both equally beyond the realm of the pale of Torah Judaism. In fact, the Rambam in his Parshas Mishnayos in the 8th Yesod, the Rambam codifies this. The Rambam says the 8th principle of faith is that the Torah is from heaven. We believe that the entirety of the Torah was given to Moshe Rabbeinu. What was Moshe Rabbeinu's role in the Torah? He merely was a scribe. God dictated and he transcribed. That's all he did. Moshe played no role in the words of the Torah other than writing down what God told him. If anyone says, the Rambam says, Moshe Rabbeinu made up the stories, chas v'sham, or added details to the story, or made it juicier, or switched something to make it sound better, is a koifer b'Torah. Says the Rambam, there's no difference between the pasuk B'nei Kam Kush U'Mitzrayim, or the pasuk V'Shem Ishtai Mehei Tavel, or the pasuk V'Timna Hisa Pilegesh, and the pasuk Anochi Hashem Lekecha. One is not more important than the other. Every pasuk has equal importance, that it is Devar Hashem, it is the word of the Almighty. Anyone who claims Moshe Rabbeinu favors one pasuk over the other, or that Moshe Rabbeinu may added or took away, says the Rambam, Amru Chachamim, Hamamin Shekol HaTorah Mipi HaGvura Chutz Mi Pasuk Zeh Ki Dvar Hashem Baza. He's worse than the biggest koifer. Fine, that's what the Rambam says. Comes the Rambam in Hilchos Tshuva, and he codifies this lahalacha even further. So far it's very interesting, because if you look in the Gemara says, what's a koifer? Someone who says Torah is not min hashamayim, even one pasuk. Comes the Rambam in Hilchos Tshuva in Parakei Halacha Ches, and the Rambam says the following three people are koifer b'Torah. Ha'oimer she'ein ha'Torah me'im Hashem, afilu pasuk echad, afilu teva achas. The Rambam adds a detail that's not mentioned in the Gemara. The Gemara says that a koifer is someone who denies a pasuk. The Rambam adds even one word. So you're always entitled to ask on the Rambam, who told the Rambam? How does the Rambam know? The Gemara doesn't say that. The Gemara says that anyone who says a pasuk is not min hashamayim is a koifer b'Torah. How does the Rambam know even one word? Says Rav Moshe Feinstein, Yaredeya, Chelak Gimel, Siman Kuf Yadalid, number 7 on your sheets. Smack him all the piece. V'yavsha b'loshen ha'Gemara Isa rak chutz mi pasuk zeh. Pashud ubarur shafilu teva achas. It's obvious, it's blatant, it's clear, even one word. And says Rav Moshe, it's obvious, even one word. Why is it obvious? Because either you believe Moshe Rabbeinu was an accurate scribe, or not an accurate scribe. Either you accept the fact that Moshe was faithful to his job, or not. If we are required to believe Moshe didn't tamper, there's no difference between a pasuk and a word. And therefore the Rambam is entitled to say that if somebody says, really, all it said is Vayidaber Hashem al Moshe, and Lamar Moshe put in because it just sounds better. Imagine Vayidaber Hashem al Moshe. Moshe knew the tune is catchy. If you put in the word Lamar, Apikorsus is a koifer b'Torah. If anyone challenges one word in the Chumash, is a koifer b'Torah. Says Rav Moshe, if that's the case, if the Rambam felt that even though the Gemara says pasuk, the Rambam added word, I say, says Rav Moshe, even ois. Got it? 3 steps. The Gemara says a pasuk. The Rambam adds even one word. Says Rav Moshe, the Gemara doesn't say this, but by extension, let's extrapolate. If the Rambam is entitled to add even a word, I would add even one letter. Meaning, if somebody would say that Moshe added one letter of the Chumash or subtracted one letter, Einoi b'chalal amisech, they are not considered shomrei Torah u'mitzvos. Don't marry them. If they touch your wine, that's not mavushal, it's yayin nesech. They're not b'chalal misecha. They're not within the fold. Just one letter? I mean, come on, what's the guy doing? You can't tamper with the divinity of the Torah. You can't even challenge minutia. Okay, that's what Rav Moshe writes. Says Rav Moshe, what if a Navi would come along? What if Yecheskel HaNavi came along and said, God told me there are just too many letters in the Torah. We're just going to take away one yud. Just one little yud. God told me, Then Yecheskel Chas V'Shalom, the Navi would be a koifer, and he would be chayiv chenek. So that's the halacha. If someone takes out a letter in the Torah, they're considered a koifer and they're chayiv chenek. The only thing is, says Rav Moshe, the famous Gemara in Kedushin, that the Gemara had a shaila. The Gemara said the vav of the word gicha in Parsha Shmini is the middle letter of the Torah, and the Gemara wants to know, what do you mean middle? On this side or on that side? Because there are even number of letters, right? So the Gemara says, why don't we just count? Like the Gemara brings another Amora, when he needed to count, he took out a Sefer Torah and he counted, and the Gemara says, because we are no longer baki b'chaserois v'yaserois. We're not baki when a vav does appear, doesn't appear, when a yud does appear, doesn't appear. And that's why the Rama paskins that when you have a shaila about a Sefer Torah, about a vav or a yud, an extra letter or a missing letter, we're not going to pass the Sefer Torah for that, because we don't have the clear tradition anymore. But if we did, a letter that we do know, for example, the Beis of Bereshis, if somebody comes and says, last night I had a dream, and God came to me, and God told me to take out the Beis of Bereshis, is a koifer b'Torah. It's chayiv chanek. Meaning so this is the chiddush of Rav Moshe. The Gemara says pasuk, the Rambam says a word. Rav Moshe says it's pashut, the Rambam's entitled to add word, and by extension even letter. Now what does this have to do with the manuscript? We're going to see. Therefore, says Rav Moshe, there's a Piscatosis. This is one of the most interesting things I've ever come across. The Piscatosis says, so we know that Ezra, the scribe, was a professional scribe. And Chazal are mashma that Ezra was entitled to make certain amendations and corrections. But what would that mean even? He couldn't have added a letter. He couldn't have taken away a letter. But Chazal imply that he made what's called scribe amendations. For example, if you write a book and you give it to an editor, the editor may take out words or add words, not just to make clear what you're trying to convey. Chazal imply that Ezra had the right to do that, but what would he have done already? Could he have taken out words? Could he have added words? So the Piscatosis in Menachos says, he did. He tampered with the following. Dots. You know how in the Sefer Torah there are dots over certain words? Let's say when Yaakov meets Esav, the pasuk says, Vayishakeu, that Esav kissed him, and Rashi brings down two perushim. If it says he kissed him, that means he kissed him. The dots say that he really didn't kiss him wholeheartedly. Or if Esav would have kissed him, we know for sure he wouldn't have kissed him wholeheartedly. The dots say in this instance he did kiss him. Dots are like an asterisk. I'll explain for those who don't know. So they have these big chayas who play professional sports. Now the ball is coming 100 miles an hour. It's not really humanly possible to hit that ball, let's say 400 feet. So what do? They take injections that are meant for racehorses, and they inject themselves. This way, the ball, which is this size, appears to them as if it's like a beach ball, because their vision is so enhanced through these hormones that it's ki'ilu like a basketball is coming. They then hit the ball, they could hit it 70 times out of the park in 1 year. It's an amazing thing what those things could do. The thing is, if you do that consistently, you're going to go to a certain ear in New York called Cooperstown. In Cooperstown, there's a makom where they recognize these chayas. Yeah. Now the problem is, but they got an unfair advantage. Now nothing's to say they haven't been doing this last 50, 60 years in some way, but at least these people were caught. So in Cooperstown, by their statistics, they'll put a little dot, asterisk, meaning they're shakronim, ganovim, they did not, yeah. Those who understand what I'm saying, they understand. If you don't understand, I could try to explain to you with more amkas after the shiur. That's what a dot is. The dot is like, it doesn't really belong here. Meaning, if you have a question about this word, don't worry, there's a dot. For instance, okay, again, I apologize for the comparison, but that's what the dot is. There's a pasuk in Nitzavim. In Nitzavim it says, Hanistarois la'Hashem Elokeinu, Hanistarois la'Hashem Elokeinu, v'haniglois lanu l'vaninu. Haniglois lanu l'vaninu means like this, that if my friend doesn't have Vera, I'm responsible. Yeah, there's a guy 2 rows behind me. He's talking by davening. I'm achroi for him. He just violated Gadol Avonim Nesai. I'm responsible. I can't say Shalom Alayich Nafshi. I'm responsible. If he's doing an Avera that I don't know about, so what do you want from my life? I'm not a Malach. I can't know what he's doing in the privacy of his home, but what he does publicly, I'm responsible for. The thing is that when did a Jew become responsible for another Yid? At what point in history? Not when the Torah was given, when we crossed the Yarden. When we crossed the Yarden at the Arvos Moav, we took upon ourselves Arvos. So really, what do you mean, Haniglois lanu l'vaninu? I'm not responsible for you until we cross the Yarden. On the words lanu l'vaninu, there are dots, meaning to say, not always. I'm not always responsible. Yaakov was not really kissed by Esav. Vayomer Elav, Ayesar Eshtechan, Elav, there are dots. They're dots. Rashi brings down on the brothers went Leroy says sign. They're dots. Dots mean you're bothered. Don't worry. It's not really supposed to be here. Now it's there. The word is there, but if it like assuages any questions you might have. Right. So the Piscatosis writes, when Ezra wrote the Torah, he made Nekudais. He said, if Moshe asks me, why do you put dots there? Ashiv, I'll answer, Ezra will say, Haloi machakti, I didn't erase a word. I mean, I understand if I would have erased the word, you would have had tinus on me that I'm tampering with the Torah, but all I did was I put a dot. Now from the Piscatosis, it's mashma, Ezra clearly tampered, if we could say such a thing, but very minimally. Chas v'shalom, he didn't tamper with the words, with the letters, with the nekudais, he only put dots. Why did he put a dot? Because there's something questionable. But he always has in his back pocket that if Moshe would ever challenge him, hey Ezra, what are you touching my Torah for? He'll just say back, I didn't erase any of your words. That is the innocuous version of what happened. There's something called Avos Rav Nosson. You ever hear of Avos Rav Nosson? It's like an extended braisos on Pirkei Avos. In Avos Rav Nosson, there's a very controversial version of this particular report about Ezra. Look at number 9 on the 3rd line. Elakach Amar Ezra. Im Yavai Eliyahu. This is referring to the dots on Lanu L'vanenu. If Eliyahu would come, meaning if Eliyahu would bring me back to life, and bring Moshe Rabbeinu back to life. V'yomer li, and say to me, Mimnei ma kosavta kach? Why'd you write these words Lanu L'vanenu? Omer ani loy, I'll say, Kvar no kadati aleim, don't ask me any kashas, I put dots on them. Don't ask me why I wrote these words, I put dots on the words. V'im omer li yafa kasavta, and if Eliyahu says to me, good geschriben, you wrote good, aver nikumem, I'll just erase the dot. You hear how this version is different than the Piscatosis? In Piscatosis, it says, Ezra put dots, knowing that if Moshe would ask him, why did you put the dots? I'll just say, look, I didn't erase a word. Meaning, there's no question why Ezra wrote certain words. Of course he wrote the words. He wrote the words of the Torah that Hashem told Moshe Rabbeinu. There's no debating, there's no questioning, there's nothing, it's not up for discussion what you write in the Torah. But the words of Avos Rav Nosson as we have it today are that Ezra says, that if Moshe were to ask me, why do you write Lanu L'vanenu? Like, why didn't you fix that? You know, like when you're writing a book, sometimes you'll write something because you really think it, but you know the editor is going to take it out. So Ezra's saying that if Moshe would ever come to me, if Eliyahu would ever come to me and say, why do you write this? I would say, no, don't worry, I put a dot on top. Like, and if he says, I wrote good, I'll erase the dot. The simple reading of Avos Rav Nosson implies that Eliyahu may ask Ezra, why do you write these words? Meaning, why didn't you use your editorial rights to remove them? And the answer would be, I did the next best thing, I put a dot on top. And if he says, good, yeah, you wrote good, meaning as if Ezra needs an endorsement, what to write in the Torah, I'll erase the dot. Says Rav Hagoyin Rav Moshe Feinstein, something that nobody ever said before in the 1,600 years that Avos Rav Nosson was in our possession. It's kefira and apikorsus. It's apikorsus. Now, this is not stam a rishon or this is a brisa. Must be, says Rav Moshe, there's a mistake in Gersa and Avos Rav Nosson. Mistake in Gersa? So why didn't the Gra change it? Why didn't the Bach change it? Maybe it crept in later. I can't answer why, says Rav Moshe. But to think in your mind as if one day Eliyahu would come and ask Ezra, why do you write it as if Ezra has license what yes to write, what not to write? Ezra just wrote what Moshe Rabbeinu was told by God. Even Moshe had no choice what to write in the Torah or not. It is absolute Apikorsus to believe the Avos Rav Nosson as written. You must then accept the report of the Piscatosis. You see the Piscatosis' version. Now, you see, if we didn't have other versions of this episode, it would be highly surprising that Rav Moshe would just change the Gersa. But we do. In the Piscatosis, it's clear what Ezra meant was, if Moshe would ask why I put in the dot, I would just say, look, I didn't erase anything you wrote. By the way, to make it better, what Rav Moshe, to defend, to bolster Rav Moshe's position here, if you look in the Taz, in number 11, the Taz brings down this episode, and he also says, like the Piscatosis, that if Moshe were to ask me why I put dots here, I would say I didn't erase anything. But here's the problem, friends. There's a commentary on Avos Rav Nosson. And there's only one major commentary on Avos Rav Nosson, the Binyan Yehoshua, an Achron. And he learns Avos Rav Nosson, literally, that Ezra had the right, the Tikkun Soifrim, Kefi HaTzoirach, to make minor amendations to make the Torah read better. To which Rav Moshe says, and that which the Binyan Yehoshua says, that literally what Ezra was saying is, if Moshe or Eliyahu would ask, why'd I write this and I didn't change it? I would say, don't worry, I put dots. And if he would say, I wrote well, I would erase the dot, which implies it was up to Ezra's discretion exactly how to present the Torah. Says Rav Moshe Feinstein, I'll read to you his words. V'chas lon loymar, heaven forbid to say what the Binyan Yehoshua said. Now you should know, the Binyan Yehoshua was well before Rav Moshe Feinstein. Did Rav Moshe care? No. Did it mean anything to him? Not a thing. But he was a much earlier Achron. But he's wrong. Not only that, V'shari le mari labal Binyan Yehoshua Rav Moshe, please God, forgive the sin of the Binyan Yehoshua. You have to have very big shoulders to say about an earlier Achron. Number one, Chas v'Shalom, to say what he says. And to say God should forgive him, and to say that which he wrote was Apikorsus. You know, it's one thing for a later Achron to argue with an earlier Achron, but to say an earlier Achron is saying Apikorsus, especially the later Achron is just explaining the language of Avos Rav Nosson as we have it. But it's more than that, because the Binyan Yehoshua says, by the way, I'm not making this up. You know where I got this from? From the Kas Naisar. Anyone here ever hear of the Kas Naisar? Kas Naisar was the Rebbe of Rabbi Yonasan and Eibeshitz. Rabbi Kiva Eger on Shas and the Goin HaShas sometimes will say, Ayin bekas Naisar. So that means Rav Moshe is saying not only on the Binyan Yehoshua that God should forgive him, Rav Moshe is saying on one of the Gedolei Achronim that he's just simply wrong. And not only wrong, he's wrong about one of the fundamental principles of Jewish faith.
What's the relationship between Binyan Yehoshua and the Kas Naisar?
The Binyan Yehoshua says that this Perush I saw in the Kas Naisar. Kach Kasav the Kas Naisar of Maram Ash in Parshas Nitzavim. Not only that, says Rav Moshe, look at number 14. Kol Sefer Torah Kula was written by Moshe Mipi Agvura. Every letter, anyone who says that one letter Moshe wrote out by himself, or that Ezra added, or that Ezra took away, is an Apikorsus, is Dvar Hashem Boza, and is Chayiv Chenek. Now, Rav Moshe wasn't a kanoi. And therefore, says Rav Moshe, I have major problem with this commentary that was found, this manuscript that was found by Rabbi Yehuda Hachasid. Why?
What does it do with Piscatosis?
Now, Piscatosis is okay. Because the language of Piscatosis is that what Ezra is saying, if Moshe would ask why I put a dot, I would say, look, Moshe, I didn't take out any of your words, I just put a dot. Meaning, that much right Ezra had to put a dot in the Sefer Torah. But not the way the Abbas Rav Nosson says it, that if Moshe would ask, why did I write this, as if it was up to Ezra what to write, that's Apikorsus.
So Ezra put in the words of...
No, the dots, not the words.
But it's everybody could say put in the dots.
No, but now the question is, the Abbas Rav Nosson is mashma, he had the right to put in words or not to put in words. The language of the Abbas Rav Nosson is, Ezra said, if Moshe were to ask me, why did I leave in these words? Leave in these words? It's not up to Ezra, yes, to leave in or not to leave in. The language of Abbas Rav Nosson implies that it was up to the discretion of Ezra what words to be in the Torah.
But he didn't.
He didn't take it out, but it sounded like it was up to him, which Moshe says is Apikorsus, right?
So one more second. It would be that what the Rabbi Natan, he said, question mark. The answer is, don't worry, I'll take them out.
Okay, but Moshe holds the Ezra didn't need, Moshe didn't need a haskama whether it should be there or should not be there. It's not up for grabs. It's not up for discussion. So let's talk about this manuscript of Rabbi Yehuda Hachasid. There are a number of things that Moshe held were problematic. Here's the first one. In this supposed manuscript found by found from Rabbi Yehuda Hachasid, it says on the pasuk, "Vayasem es Ephraim lefnei Menashe." He put Ephraim before Menashe. Everyone is always accustomed to learning that Yaakov Avinu gave Ephraim, the younger one, the bracha before Menashe, the older one. That's the Pasha Pshat. And Avi, when Yosef said, "Loichein Avi," not so my father, he's talking to Yaakov. In this supposed manuscript from Yehuda Hachasid, who put Ephraim before Menashe? Moshe Rabbeinu put Ephraim before Menashe. When did he put Ephraim before Menashe? When he gave the Degolim, he first gave Ephraim his flag, and then he gave Menashe his flag. Vayosem Moshe as Ephraim lefnei Menashe. So the question is, so why doesn't the Torah say, I put Ephraim before Menashe? Because after all, Moshe is writing the Sefer Torah. Says this supposed manuscript, this pasuk was written by Yehoshua or the Anshe Knesset Hagdolah. In other words, Vayosem as Ephraim lefnei Menashe, says the parish of Rabbi Yehuda Hachasid, Moshe put Ephraim before Menashe. It's not referring to that time, it's referring to later in history when Moshe gave Ephraim the degel before Menashe. And Avi refers to Moshe. And who's talking? Yehoshua. And who wrote this pasuk? Either Yehoshua ben Nun or the Anshe Knesset Hagdolah.
According to this case, Yaakov did not switch the bracha.
Whether he did or not, it's not reported in the Torah. Right. Says Rav Moshe, this is kfira in the pasuk. To say that Moshe didn't write a pasuk in the Chumash? And worse than that, says Rav Moshe. You know what to say worse than? How could something be worse than kfira? It's shtus. It's shtus. In my yeshiva, the biggest aver is don't be a fool. My father asked Rabbi Yaakov Hillel about the red thing around the... My father wanted to know, could you tell people it's avodah zarah? So Rabbi Yaakov Hillel said, no, say worse. Say it's shtus. Say, yeah, shtus is worse than avodah zarah. Because at least avodah zarah, you're an Adam. You're an Adam who's off. Shtus is like, the one thing you have over a behema. Okay, that's not part of the share, that particular incident. That's just an illustration. In Slabodka, the worst thing to be is a shaita. The Chavetz Chaim, somebody once told the Chavetz Chaim, be frim and be klig. Be frum, be religious, and be smart. Chavetz Chaim said, no, be klig and be frim. First you have to be smart. Then you could be frum. That's the first thing. First thing is you have to be straight. You have to use your mind. Okay. Says Rav Moshe, number one, it's kfira, and number two, it's shtos. So the question is, so what's going on over here? I mean, is this from Rabbi Yehuda Hachasid? Clearly, says Rav Moshe, someone was Mazaye, forged the manuscript of Rabbi Yehuda Hachasid. Somebody sort of copied over certain things Rabbi Yehuda Hachasid said, and injected kfira. And whoever this forger was a Rasha, was an Apikorsus, and a Shaita. By the way, that's a very good combination. Can you imagine? Rasha, Apikorsus, and Shaita. So you say, well, no, Rabbi, why are you talking about Parshas Chukas? Okay, here's the clincher. In this supposed document from Yehuda Hachasid, in this week's Parsha, when the Jewish people had nothing to drink, so they're benefiting from Be'er Shel Miriam. So the pasuk says, "Oz Yashir Yisrael Es Hashir Azoy Sleimar Ali Ve'er Enula Be'er Chafaruha Sarim Karuha Nediveyam B'Mechaykek B'Meshanazam Umi Midbar Matano Umi Matano Umi Nachleal Bamais Umi Bamais Hagai, right? V'Nishkafa V'Nishkafa Pnei HaYishimayin." That's the Shir HaBe'er. Ali Be'er Enula. That's Shiras HaBe'er. The Pashup Pshat, right? Azriel, right? The Pashup Pshat is what? The Pashup Pshat is, this is a song. They had water. You know, when you're thirsty, don't get me on this Coca-Cola. Cold Poland spring, there's nothing like it. Right? Be'er Shel Miriam, even though they discovered that in a lot of the water, they're plastic particles, right? They did a study recently, and in a lot of the waters, the bottled waters, there's all kinds of plastic. Not Poland spring. Tap water is better. So when you're thirsty, there's nothing like water, and you want to sing, and the Jewish people sang. Says this supposed document of Yehuda Hachasid, you know what they sang? Haydu Lashem ki tov yom chastai. Haydu le'elokei elokim yom chastai. Haydu la'adonai adam yom chastai. Lo yisen avos yom chastai. Lo yisen shvayim b'sun yom chastai. Wait a second, what do you mean they sang it? But it's not in the Torah. David came along later, and he took it out, and he put it in Tehillim. David, and it's obvious that, but that was really written by Moshe Rabbeinu, says this manuscript. You know why? Who said Noisein lechem l'chol basar ki li'elam chazdai? Moshe, when the man fell. Who do you think said l'sichayin melech ha'amayriu la'oig melech habashan? David? David never saw Sichain. David never saw Oig. Who fought Sichain? Who fought Oig? No one other than Moshe. Clearly Moshe wrote it. When did he write it? Here. This is Shiras HaBe'er. So why isn't it here? David took it out. He took out all of Moshe's stuff. It's not the only thing Moshe took out. There's certain things Yeshua ben Nun said, like Sha'im deveis Hashem ba'leilos, and David came and he took it out, and he added Shochen Yerushalayim Hallelujah. Says Rav Moshe, this is Kfira Hayoiser Gedoyla B'Torah. This is the greatest possible Kfira. Not only that, to say that something was in the Torah and was taken out, yeah. Not only that, it's Lashon Hara on David HaMelech, that David would have tampered with the Torah. This is the worst kind of kfira. You know why it's the worst kind of kfira? Because, Elamai, you want to eat a cheeseburger, so you say Moshe made it up. Fine. What do you care? What do you have to gain by saying that there were this Parakuf Lamed Vav in Tehillim was in the Torah, and then you took it out? It's kfir lahaches. It's kfira in the miracle of the Be'er Shel Miriam. So I think we're all saying, yeah, obviously, like, how could anybody ever, like, what was this person, by the way, I know this person's name. I'm not going to say it on the camera. Well, this person who's publishing the manuscript, like, what's he thinking? To really think that the Shiras HaBe'er was Hoidu Hashem Gidom Yom Chastai and David took it out? Here's the problem, friends. There's a lot of support that this is true. You know what the support is? Says Rav Moshe, after I wrote this, I was told, I got a hold of a certain sefer called Tziyuni. Now, between me and you, I've brought the Tziyuni a number of times over the years. Rav Menachem Tziyuni. In fact, Rav Menachem Tziyuni is one of the official Sfarim on the Chidah's Gedoyle Yisrael list. You know, the Chidah lists all the Sfarim of the Gedoyle Yisrael. And by the way, any sefer that's remotely controversial, the Chidah doesn't bring. he doesn't bring Sfarim from Big Gedolei Yisrael because there was slight controversy. How many Sfarim of the Ramchal does the Chida bring? None. He doesn't bring. Many Sfarim of other Big Gedolei he doesn't bring if there's controversy. And he brings a Tziyuni. He says the Sefer the Tziyuni ala Torah is a Kabbalistic Sefer with Chidushim Noiraim based on the Zohar, the Sefer HaBahir, and other Sifrim Mekubalim. He was a Jew who lived in the middle of the 14th century. Look at number 25. In the Chida's official list of all-time great Gedolei Yisrael, the Chida says Rabbi Menachem Tziyuni, not Rav like he says by a lot of people, number 25. Rabbi! The Chida certainly, and Rabbi Menachem Tziyuni, number 22, quotes Rabbi Yehuda Hachasid, that the original Shiras HaBe'er was Haidul Hashem Kitov Ilam Chastoi, and David took it out of the Torah. Comes Rav Moshe, and Rav Moshe says, I don't care that Rav Menachem Tziyuni 700 years ago quotes Rabbi Yehuda Hachasid, who says this. Who cares? That doesn't answer anything. Kfira is kfira is kfira. Lashon hara on David HaMelech is Lashon hara is Lashon hara. I don't know exactly who this Rav Menachem Tziyuni is. The Chida quotes him? Okay. That means it's not kfira? The fact that the Chida calls him Rebbe, this is kfira. He probably just copied over what somebody else attributes to Rabbi Yehuda Hachasid. Therefore, says Rav Moshe, not only are you not allowed to publish this manuscript of Rabbi Yehuda Hachasid, you cannot buy the Sefer Tziyuni al HaTorah anymore. I didn't know this. I didn't know that Tziyuni says this. But now that I know that Tziyuni says it, so this is a book of Arisha, and that just take off your shelf. I was reminded conveniently before the Shiur that I remember the Shlach HaKadosh quotes the Tziyuni 26 times in a Sefer. But I don't care who quotes him. Kfira is kfira. No, they're different drachim in Judaism. No, they're not. They're not different drachim. Not when it comes to emunah. Not when it comes to basics. They're not different approaches. You might like to think there are. You might have a nature that's inclined to certain things, so you want to say they're different approaches. There aren't different approaches. The Rambam is Yud Gimel Ikrim. They're not different versions of this. There's Torah min Hashamayim, and that's it. So let's think for a moment. Who Rav Moshe is taking down? Who is he taking on? He's taking on the simple Gersa and the Avis Rav Nassan. He's taking on the Binyan Yehoshua. He's taking on the Kos Naisar. And he's taking on the Tziyuni al Torah. And with it, all the great Gedolim, including all the Mekubalim who always quote the Tziyuni al Torah. I don't care who quotes him, doesn't do anything. It's the Rambam tells us what the principles of faith are, and there's nothing to talk about. But it's in a holy book, it's in a Sefer, it's in the Sfarim HaKadoshim. Right? So there are no Sfarim HaKadoshim, there's the Rambam. And we're going to learn a very big Yesod from Rav Moshe. A Yesod that if you come to these Shiurim, you might get the wrong impression, and that's why I want to clarify this Yesod. As much as I love to learn many, many, many Sfarim, and Sfarim that many are not familiar with, there is no obligation and Chiyuv and Mitzvah to learn all the Sfarim. The Iker is the main Sfarim, like the Rambam. And we'll see the Rashba, the Ramban, the Rif. And by the Achronim, a few Achronim. You're certainly allowed to, but the main thing is the mainstream Achronim. Because the truth is, every single approach in Judaism, you'll find somebody who says it, but some are just more normative and correct. There's normative halacha and there's normative hashkafa. And not only normative, Ramesh says the other is just, it's not wrong, it's not Judaism. It's not Judaism. Meaning, but what do you mean? Binyan Yehoshua, Kos Naisar, Tziyoni. I don't care who says it, it's kfira. You can't publish it.
What did happen? Why is it?
So what happened? What happened is, bring in the Gedolei Eretz Yisrael. Who are the Gedolei Eretz Yisrael? Rabbi Yashiv and Rav Shlomo Zalman. And supposedly they struck a deal with the publisher. They said, you stop publishing this work. You remove all these 3 questionable sources. You write that the original publication of the Yehuda Hachasid contained in it 3 forgeries. We didn't speak them all out. We just spoke out about Shiras HaBe'er, and we spoke out Vayasam Esafran L'fnei Menashe. There's another one. And you write the original publication had 3 forgeries in it, and now you're publishing the homogenized, the filtered version of Rabbi Yehuda Hachasid. Says Rav Moshe to Rav Shlomo Zalman Auerbach. Rav Moshe says, I'm ill, I have no strength, but I empower myself and I awaken myself to fight Melchemes Hashem. You cannot allow this individual to publish this volume, even if he removes these 3 questionable sources. Why not? Says Rav Moshe, I found a 4th questionable source. I'm going to tell you something, that this is the most shocking thing you'll ever heard. If you never heard this before and you're living in 2018, this is going to be the most incredible thing you ever heard. Whatever morals that you hear in society, this is completely the opposite. Okay? So just brace yourself. You're gonna have to get used to this. I know this for a long time. Nobody ever believes me until I show it to them. Says Rav Moshe, I came across another passage here in Parshas Achrei Mos, where it talks about Mishkav Zachar. Frek, the manuscript of Yehuda Hachasid, why did the Torah aser Mishkav Zachar? Answers Rabbi Yehuda Hachasid, because the Torah wanted somebody to marry an Isha for Periya Verivya. Periya Verivya is only an Aseh, and Mishkav Zachar is Skila. But the Torah made a Geder for Periya Verivya. So you think about it, it sounds very reasonable. That makes sense. That the Torah asered Ish ve'ish, Ishu behema, because the Torah wants you to have children. Says Rav Moshe, this is Rishus to the greatest possible degree. This is Rishus Gedoyla. Why? Because it weakens the Isser Be'enei Ha'am. It weakens the Isser. It weakens the Avera to these Balei Taiva who are Mechu Eres, and it's one of the greatest Toyevos. Don't let them fool you with, I won't say Pablo, don't let them fool you that, no. It's davar mechuar b'yoyser, says Chumash. Not only that, look how times have changed in 40 years. Af umayis ha'olam yoydin shehem toyevoy she'ein kamoisam. Look how the world has changed in 40 years. Even the goyim know that there's nothing more abominable. To ask a question why the Torah asered it? Hello, good morning, America. You need to ask a question why the Torah asered it? Merely to ask this question is rishus. We don't need a reason why the Torah asered a toyeva. The ganze Welt considers these people minuvalim ve'ena min hayishav. The whole world knows that people who do this are not members of society. Therefore, to ask the question why is mamish a davar nevala, and it removes the busha from it, and the cherpa, and the zilzul. As if to say it's not an erva, and then to say it's only usur so that people have children, as if it's not an erva. It's megale panim b'Torah shaloy k'halacha. It's mamish rishus. Sometimes you need a reality check. You live in this generation, you're bombarded with the exact opposite. So sometimes you need to see, this is Das Torah. The problem is, there's a Tosfos that quotes this exact line from Rabbi Yehuda Hachasid. Which Tosfos? The Moshav Zakenim. It's one of the, not a very common Bala Tosfos, if in number 29. He goes, Rabbi Yehuda Hachasid Perish, that Masha Asra Torah Mishkav Zachar Yishasam Nashim. What would Rabbi Moshe say? I could care less who quotes it. The Rambam quotes it. The Rif quotes it. The Rajva says it. Tosfos on the page of the Gemara quotes. So you found a sefer. A sefer is good when you want to give a hashkafa shir, you want to give an interesting shir, but halacha l'maisa, you don't deal with that. So the question is, so take out that piece, take out a fourth piece and publish the rest. Said Moshe, no. This is unbelievable. You ready? The Gemara says in Shabbos, Yud Gimel Amud Beis, that there was a certain sefer called Sefer Yecheskel, and the Gemara says there was a person by the name of Hananiah ben Chizkiah, Zachur Latoiv, because if not for him we would have buried Yecheskel, because there are things in Yecheskel that are stira to the Torah. For example, it says in Yecheskel, a kohen can't eat an avela, as if a regular person could. And Hananiah ben Chizkiah went up into his attic with 300 barrels of oil, and he learned, and he found Terutzim. And if not for him, we would have buried Yecheskel. Says Rav Moshe, why bury Yecheskel? I have a question. Did the Chachamim ever think Yecheskel wasn't a Navi? Avada, we knew Yecheskel wasn't a Navi. Did the Chachamim ever think Yecheskel wrote something that was wrong? Chas v'shalom. So what was the problem? The problem was that even though we know that Yecheskel was a valid Navi, and by the way, every word of Yecheskel, every single Jew is obligated to learn. It's part of the Torah. Every word of the Nevi'im, every word of the Ksuvim, a Jew must learn. But nevertheless, if we didn't know how to reconcile Yecheskel to the Chumash, then we're required to remove Yecheskel from the canon. But what do you mean? How could you remove Nevuah? We know the Gemara Megillah says that there were millions of Nevi'im, only the Nevuah that's needed for all generations was written down. How could we take away Sefer Yecheskel? God wants us to know Sefer Yecheskel. The answer is that it's more worthwhile to remove the entire Yecheskel from the canon so that we don't jeopardize people's emunah. You're right. Ordinarily, if somebody would take out a pasuk of Navi, he would be an Apikorsus. But under the circumstances, because we didn't know how to reconcile Yecheskel with the Torah, we would have to remove it. Even though we know there is a reconciliation, we just don't know what it is. Furthermore, look at number 31. The Gemara says they wanted to bury Koheles. They wanted to bury Mishlei, because Koheles contradicts itself. Mishlei contradicts itself. Until they were able to come up with an explanation. And Mishlei, they didn't even have an explanation. But once they realized Koheles had one, they figured if they look hard enough, they'll find one from Mishlei also. And this is where a vintage Rav Moshe. I'll ask you a question, says Rav Moshe. We know every word of Nevuah, every Jew has to learn. If you take out a word of Navi, you're a kofer. So why did they have to bury the whole Yecheskel, the whole Mishlei, and the whole Koheles? Just take out anything objectionable. The answer is because the Chachamim know that if they who are great sages find things which are objectionable that they can't answer, then probably the average Joe will find many things that they can't answer. And things that maybe the Chachamim won't even notice because to them the answer is obvious. So anytime there's a book that there's something questionable about, you have to remove the whole book. In fact, Rav Moshe says, but how could the Chachamim take away Torah? Aren't you a kofer if you take away a pasuk of Torah? The answer is, Eis lasois lashem heferu Torasecha. That anytime there's a jeopardy, that something might be violated in the Torah, even if it's just, if we allow you to shake the lulav on Shabbos, you might carry. The Chachamim say, so don't take the lulav. We have the authority to remove a mitzvah. They even have the authority to remove Torah if the Torah cannot be reconciled. Even though we know that Yecheskel is a Navi, and that Shlomo is a great Chacham, and is a Baal Ruach HaKodesh. But if we just don't know how to explain it, even if it's just a few psukim, we have to remove the whole book. And therefore, says Rav Moshe, this book of Rabbi Yehuda Hachasid, you're right, there are only 4 things that seem to be problematic. Whether it's that the Haidul Hashem Kitav Yilam Chasei was removed by David HaMelech, whether it's that it's Moshe who made Ephraim from Menashe, whether it's his rationale for Mishkav Zachar, but that's just what it looks like to me. But you never know, maybe an average Joe will find something objectionable in the other parts of Rabbi Yehuda Hachasid. And I just don't have the energy and time to go through every single word. How could I just remove Torah from the shelf? Says Rav Moshe, his famous Yesod is there is no mitzvah or chiyuv to learn every sefer on the shelf. You know why? because it's impossible to learn every sefer on the shelf. All you need to learn is the following: Torah, Nevi'im, Ksuvim, Mishnayos, Gemara, and the main Rishonim. You want to learn more, Gesund to hate, but now you have a question that has clear problems in some of its passages. You got to remove the book. Not only that, says Moshe, you must burn the book. And Moshe was not a kanoi. Moshe writes, Vadai efshir shaharbe dvarim loy ro'inu lefum rota v'tzorech gam levaer mamish al yedei sreifa. You would not expect in a tshuva Rav Moshe that his psak will be burn a sefer. You know, it's not an answer you would have expected from Rav Moshe. Especially, think about who he's thinking about. This publisher. Think about who he has to back him up. He has a Binyan Yehoshua. He has a Kas Noisar. He has a Gerson Avos Rab Nasan. He has Ramnachem Tziyuni ala Torah. He has the Balei Atoisvis. Who other than Rav Moshe would muster the guts, not only to argue on it? I mean, he's not just arguing. He's saying it's kfira. Not only is it kfira, the whole book is kfira, and you have to burn the whole sefer. Rav Moshe says and Rav Moshe's right. Rav Shlomo Zalman was going to let at least the rest of it go. Rav Moshe says no. Rav Moshe writes the following language. The Gam, it's on page 3. Rav Moshe says, in the beginning of Tshuva Kuf Tes Vav, Arhiv benavshi oiz lichtav lahadis goyne v'asher shabani. I gird myself, I burn, my soul burns with strength to fight this war. Look at the courageousness, look at the boldness of Rav Moshe to take on, not just Gedolei Yisrael, take on Kadmoinim, early Achroinim. To Rav Moshe, if it wasn't part of the main tradition, the Tur, the Rambam, the Rif, the Rosh, the Rashba, the Ramban, the Tur, and among the Achroinim, Rav Moshe held the Marsha, Rabbi Kiva Eger, the Pnei Yeshua. Other Achroinim, Rav Moshe is not Nispal. Not only that, other Rishonim. If Rav Moshe, if we don't know who they are, he's not Nispal. He's not Nispal. So that's why I say, there are many times that there are many things that come up in life, and the truth is, if a person's not an honest person, there are different opinions. Friends, there are always different opinions. Look at this issue. There are different opinions. One opinion is it's Torah, and one opinion is it's Apikorsus and it has to be burned. But Moshe was a Gadol Hadar. So a person needs a lot of siyata d'shmaya in life to know not just what is, you could farlozach, you ever hear this one? You could farloz, you could really be saimech on this opinion. There's always an opinion to be saimech on. The question really is, but what's the right way to do it? And that you need siyata d'shmaya, and you need to be mevakesh the emes. I'll give you two examples. The Piskei Tshuva writes that if you ask someone a shaila, and he tells you the wrong answer, you're amazed. Unless you ask the poskim for samim, you have to ask a real posik. Yes, I checked up online. I looked up online, and it says you could do that. No, if you have to ask a real posik. Otherwise, you can't even say, well, I asked somebody, I relied on them. I'll tell you one last Gemara in Hariyos. You go over to a Rav, you say, Rav, you heard a Rav say in a Shiur, the follow, you're allowed to do X, Y, and Z, and you rely on it. Can't rely on it. You go over to a Rav and you say, Rav, just wondering, what's the halacha in this case? This is halacha. And you rely on it. You're amazed. In order to rely on a psak, you have to go over to a Rav and say, Rav, it is noigeya me right now. What should I do? Oh, it's noigeya you? Oh, 1 second. Let me check up all the makairos. You have to realize, not just because somebody says something, it has to be, you have to know how to present it, you have to know who to ask, you have to know how to ask it, in the right tone, in the right and then if you ask in the proper way, then you get the right direction. So this is one example of, here you have so many great people that say it's Torah, And Rabbi Moshe Feinstein says it's straight up Apikorsus. So, as they say, the world is a very narrow bridge. And I would say the ikar is not to be afraid, the ikar is to be afraid. Asher yodam mefachei tamid. Meaning you have to be concerned. You have to know, do your due diligence in seeking out the truth. Rabbi say, have a great evening. Shkayach.
You've just experienced another Torah class brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.